Hello, I am Tavish Carduff here with Duffy,
Hello.
my dad, in the second of 3 weeks that we're going to do the spiritual weeks. So, our raw material, this is listening week, and you can find us on right here on YouTube, on our website, and on Instagram. We have a question that we kind of pose for each week. This week, are the thoughts in your head mostly harmful or helpful? We'll be right back.
I'd never really thought about the thoughts in my head being harmful or helpful. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, they are what they are and they come in, but some thoughts are probably harmful and others are helpful. So it's an interesting question.
It is. And when we really start to dissect where our thoughts go, it seems like we can't do anything about them. And we probably can't do anything about the initial thought, but we can direct the thoughts and we can train ourselves to recognize if the thoughts we're having are supporting us or not supporting us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to dive right in since I have my dad here in a spiritual week to talk about, like when I was a teenager, let's say, and just, go for the jugular right off the bat. I felt like I wasn't listened to. But as I've grown up, as I've gotten older, I've realized you're an incredible listener. My own listening skills were masked by the fact that, I didn't want to disappoint you or I didn't want to upset you. Those things were out in front. When we start to pay attention to how we listen, we start to see where we stand in our own way, or where we have stood in our own way. I mean, obviously, kids don't have the experience that an adult has. So, just the vastness of what an adult has taken in can seem more, I don't know what the word is, valuable or important than what a kid thinks.
Well, when you were young, you would tend to predetermine what our reaction was going to be and then base all of your later actions upon that without ever really listening or hearing what we were trying to say. You had already decided what we were going to say and how you were going to deal with it. So that was difficult.
I'm sure it was a parenting challenge, but it's also a human challenge because I do think that is the way so many of us operate in the world.
Oh, I agree.
Not hearing what the intention of someone else is, but hearing whatever is in the way, like I said, not wanting to disappoint, I think was out in front of being able to recognize, like, you were a resource for help and support. But I don't think that I was able to hear that as a child. Luckily, we have been able to have conversations like this through life and look at things objectively.
Right. No, you've changed your outlook on that for sure. One of the things I've thought is very curious about listening, many, if not most people, spend the time they should be listening to what's being said, coming up with what they're going to respond with, and not really hearing what's being said, but consequently they end up way ahead of themselves without really hearing where they should be going. So I've always thought that was very curious, but a fact and something that we all have to deal with. I mean, all the time.
I'm taking it in. You're right. We don't listen. And I do want to just take a moment to have everybody hear that when we listen, without saying what the next thing is that we want to say, we get to take in the depth of what is actually being said to us. I mean, even as we try to sit and listen, oftentimes our own interpretations are out in front of what somebody else is saying. So we might hear it in a different way than they mean it, even if we are listening.
Though you tend to anticipate what they're going to say. And most of the time, you'll be incorrect in doing so.
We watch that over and over in our own family happen.
Always. Yes.
And being able to treat it observationally rather than everybody mad all the time has kind of been our go-to. And it helps to try to figure out what people actually want, need, and are saying.
True.
And that starts with the self. That starts with knowing your own objective. What are you actually trying to convey?
And knowing when to actually respond and when to put the shuck up.
Truth. I know that you didn't ever call it this when we were kids, but you did break things down in a way that helped me identify my ego's needs and wants and the things that my ego was listening to versus the things that my soul was listening to. And those voices are often at odds.
They're always at odds.
So I was just hoping you could give a little expression on that. I call it soul ego balance, but it's something you taught me early.
Well, it's responding off the top rather than from deep inside, I think. I mean, letting it sink in first all the way, then you're going to come up with a more valid response than your immediate reaction. And people's immediate reaction tends to be somewhat, what's the word I'm looking for? Confrontational is the word I was trying to find. And confrontational does not put you in a good place for having a meaningful conversation, because you're always defending something rather than exploring something between the two of you, or however many are in the conversation to start with. When you're busy defending yourself, it's hard to hear what everyone else is trying to say.
Absolutely true.
And silence is not a bad thing, and a lot of people can't sit with each other in silence and be happy. They feel they got to say something or do something
or
not
prevent
true.
the conversation from happening.
Or prevent the conversation from happening, or, yeah, that's true.
I mean, as a listener, what happens when you're listening to something that you really don't agree with or want to hear?
Then you should say that. I mean,
do you wait until they're done?
Well, I don't think so. I think you step right in and say, I don't agree with that. And here's why.
I think you let them talk first.
Yeah.
Because listening really does involve finding that space of what we're letting in.
That's true. And if you jump in, you don't get the whole gist of what they're trying to say. So I agree.
And that's the paradox, though. Mm-hmm. There are things that we don't want to hear. And there's only so much time in a day. So how much do you let in that is incongruent to your own thoughts and feelings? It becomes a matter of personal boundaries.
Well, sometimes there's just so much you can hear. It's better to listen to the whole thing. But then there are those people that will ramble on and on and on, and you got to shut them down.
One thing I noticed that you always did that I've taken into my own listening skill set is to ask questions when people do that. To pose a question that leads them in a direction that's different than the one that they're headed, especially if it's something you've already heard before from them.
Yeah. Well, question's always a good thing, because that at least makes them think about their response rather than going with the response they've already prepared in their head.
Correct. It gets you out of the set narrative and into something new to listen to.
Right. With employees, I had to do this all the time, and I'd say, wait a minute. Now, hear what I'm saying before you work on your response, because you're not hearing what we're really trying to accomplish here. The best comment I ever heard was from grandson Clay when he was about 3 years old. We were discussing something, and he finally looks at me and he says, "Put on your listening ears, Beep." And I thought, wow, out of the mouths of babes, but he was so right. I've taken that to heart ever since. And now he's in his 20s, so it's been a while.
I like that. It makes a difference when you have intention around listening, because we are in the habit so often of letting the things we don't want to hear fall away. Maybe it's because we're looking for the next thing to say. Maybe it's because we just tune it out. But tuning in and tuning out as a practice and as a regular thing that we pay attention to becomes a useful tool for the pillar of listening.
Well, it's easy to tune out when you're listening to something that just doesn't interest you at all. I mean, there is that, and that happens a lot, and that's probably where I tune out.
You know, when I was a kid, I don't know if you remember this, but when I would have a bad dream, I could change the channel in my head, and sometimes it would go to something else, and sometimes it would come back around to the same bad dream I was having. But I had an awareness that I could actually just in my mind click the channel, those old dial channels we used to have, and it would switch. And I don't know when I gave up that power. I don't have a lot of nightmares anymore, but that was something, just when we're younger, we do have an ability to tune in and out in a natural way. As parents and functional human beings in the world, we need to follow schedules and do things differently. So we really pull ourselves from the natural listening and into something that's a little more artificial. And the way that we each adapt to that is different for each of us. But being aware of when and how we tune in and out is really important.
Well, a good example of that is like if you're watching a movie or a TV show with another person, and they will get a whole completely different message than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And you both listened and saw the same thing, and there's nothing to say. They're right or you're right, or it's just, wow, I didn't get that part. And so that has always been very interesting to me also.
When it's somebody that you value their opinion and their thoughts, you take it in, and now your thoughts become richer.
Right. You learn more.
Going back to that question, whether our thoughts are helpful or harmful, those thoughts are what we hear every day. I mean, we spend a lot more time quiet within ourselves than we do talking in our days.
Well, say you're listening to somebody and you disagree with them so tremendously that you think, I think we should take that person's head off. They don't deserve to be here any longer. And so that's a thought that has definitely occurred to me, and I've had to, it's not something I would ever act upon, but
right.
It was still a thought that came into my head listening to some politicians especially. And so you end up taking it with a grain of salt and saying, I hope other people are hearing this the same way I am, because this just isn't right. Listening to them is probably the hardest thing of all, because they all say what they think you want to hear rather than truly addressing the issues.
Big breath around that, because I think you're right, and I think you've hit on the sort of snake nest of our most touchy subject collectively, at least in the United States.
Especially now.
The politics of everything has gotten to where listening is actually something that we refuse to do.
Well, there's a difference between a refusal to listen and a refusal to hear. I can listen to things and not hear them, because
True.
I just won't hear them.
I mean, even as we are recording this video, there's a clock that's chimed in the background right on something really important that you were saying, which seems to happen a lot in these recordings. So I leave them in. We've got Floyd over here making noise in his bird cage. We've got the air coming on and off. If you sit quietly, you can hear the pool outside and And there goes Floyd right now,
He's waving at us,
flapping wings and saying, yes, this is true.
saying hello.
So there are messages that come in all the time that if we don't quiet our brains, we really don't hear that stuff. We
Right.
have to be out in a quiet space in nature to appreciate nature, even though you can really sit in your house and hear it if you sit
Well,
quietly.
those are the things you're tuning out. Like you said, the tuning in and tuning out, and we're tuning in or trying to tune in on this discussion while these other things go around us, and that's what we're tuning out.
That's exactly demonstrates listening.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the world really works. We don't ever have, this peace and quiet that we think we're going to find and achieve, and we're going to have this moment of uninterrupted something. Whatever this nirvana is that we all think we're going to get. There's always someone chewing a peanut in the background. There's always something happening that disrupts whatever our ego has decided that we need for our space. So listening becomes the practice of tuning in and tuning out, and doing it with thoughtfulness and intention. You mentioned the word right in reaction to politics, and I know in our family there's a very common thought, and so we are all in agreement of what is necessarily right. Really. But another family has an entirely different idea of what's right, or family members that are completely at odds on what that is. So right is relative, but the structure where we can each research and be thoughtful with our thoughts and think about the things we are listening to, what we hear, and what we then turn around and put out there for others to hear. That is the space that we could all tend for ourselves, just to make the whole world sing a little better, no matter what your actual opinions or politics are.
Yeah, the problem is all inside your head, she said to me.
It all comes back to Paul Simon, doesn't it?
In many ways.
I mean, song lyrics and music come into play in helping us calm what we're listening to, or decide how to change what we're listening to. Listening involves allowing your mind, body, the space to connect, breathe, and clear, so that when we do hear things we don't like and we don't want to hear, there's clarity for it to kind of wash through us.
You just can't dwell upon it.
It doesn't stick.
And some people dwell upon it for entirely too long. I mean, and you got to let it go away. I mean, because to leave it festering in your head is not healthy.
So what advice would you give to people stuck in those listening triggers, where as soon as they hear something, they're just so mad, whatever that thing is?
Then turn on some Paul Simon or the Beatles or some good music of some sort that you like and that inspires you.
Speaks to your soul.
And right, listen to it all the time, and it keeps me in an upbeat mood.
It does. And at 75 years old, coming off of 3 months in hospitals and things like that, mood is really important to the success of your healing, right?
Not dwelling on what just happened, but concentrating on the improvement for the future. I brought that on myself, so I can change that and bring better things upon myself, which is what I'm now concentrating upon.
And listening to your body and understanding how you
Right.
get where you do.
True. You made a really good point. I mean, it came about from not listening to my body. I mean, that was a bad job of listening on my part. So
And when the universe said, listen up,
then it got my attention. That's for damn sure.
I think listening as a skill and as a tool involves being able to be right next to things that we don't like and not let them linger, not let them affect our body, our and our thoughts. So
But then you've got to be good at communicating. And so
communication gets tough.
You can listen and hear everything there is, but unless you can respond in a manner that conveys your true meaning, sometimes it doesn't even come across.
Right. And even if you can do that, how it's received and how it lands is anybody's guess. You can only put out there what you want.
True.
So, as we hear Mom getting some ice in the background, hi, Mom. We can wrap it up. Everybody remember to drink some water.
I'm ready for some.
Breathe. Because underneath every one of these pillars is water, breath, and alignment. And each one of them leads us into ourselves in a way that allows us to just accept all of the disruptions to our attention span as we learn to listen not only with our minds and hearts and ears, but with the nature around us.
And our bodies.
And our bodies. Thank you again for being here. We'll see him again at the last
Enjoyed
weakness. And
okay.
take care next week. Values
Bye, everybody.
and ideals.
See you soon.